This entire proceeding is a sham. I will not stand here and be judged by a hypocrite like you.
A woman in a $5,000 suit walked into a Providence courtroom one Tuesday morning, and within the first minute of her hearing, she said something so dismissive that the people waiting in the gallery actually gasped. What followed wasn't just a traffic ruling, it was a collision between entitlement and accountability. And by the end, the woman who thought her wealth made her untouchable learned that some rooms still operate by different rules. I am Frederick, and I've watched courtroom cases for years. Some make you nod, some make you angry. This one made me wonder how many people walk through life genuinely believing they're exempt from the standards everyone else follows. If you think courtroom respect still matters, go ahead and hit that like button, because this story gets uncomfortable fast. The defendant's name was Victoria Ashford, 52 years old, real estate developer. The citation said she'd run a red light on Benefit Street with what the officer described as aggravating circumstances. His notes mentioned a pedestrian who nearly got hit and a driver who refused to hand over her license, saying her lawyer handled these things. Victoria entered the courtroom like she owned it. Valentino suit, diamond earrings, a Hermes bag dangling from one wrist. But it wasn't the clothes that caught people's attention. It was the attitude. She didn't look at anyone. Her phone was still glowing in her hand. She sighed like the whole process was beneath her. Judge Caprio greeted her warmly, the way he greets most people. He asked her to approach the bench. Victoria moved slowly, still scrolling on her phone. She didn't respond to the greeting. A woman in the third row whispered something to her neighbour. You could feel the shift in the room. The judge asked again, more firmly this time, for her to put the phone away. Victoria finally looked up. She made a point of correcting him. It's Miss Ashford, not Mrs. She said she didn't marry for a name. She'd built her own empire. The way she said it made it sound like the judge had insulted her. She slid the phone into her bag slowly, the gesture making it clear she was doing him a favour. Judge Caprio asked how she wanted to plead. Victoria shifted her weight, one hand on her hip. She said she was managing a $12 million deal right now and asked if they could expedite things. She had actual important matters waiting. The word actual landed hard. She'd just told a judge in open court that his courtroom didn't matter. People in the gallery reacted immediately. Quiet gasps, heads shaking. A man in a work uniform crossed his arms, his face hardening. The judge stayed professional, but something in his posture changed. He told her the proceedings were important. They concerned public safety and the rule of law. Victoria actually scoffed. A red light? She asked if he knew how many jobs she created, how much tax revenue her company brought in. She employed over 300 people. Her developments had revitalized entire neighborhoods. This citation was beneath her. She said it plainly, without embarrassment. I've seen arrogance before, but this felt different. It wasn't just pride, it was a worldview. She genuinely believed success meant exemption. Judge Caprio told her the law applied equally to everyone. Her business success didn't change that. Victoria met his eyes for the first time, and her gaze was cold. She said, with respect, that in the real world, everything has a price. She'd paid dozens of these tickets. Just tell her the fine and her assistant would handle it. She'd reduced justice to a transaction, the courtroom to a payment window. And she had no idea what she'd just set in motion. The judge reviewed the specifics. The citation said she ran a red light on Benefit Street at Hope. 3:15 in the afternoon. Did that sound correct? Victoria waved her hand. If that's what the ticket says, fine. She didn't remember every intersection. She had more important things on her mind than traffic signals. Judge Caprio pointed out that the officer's report said she'd refused to provide her license initially. Victoria's eyebrows rose. She asked why she was being stopped. That was her constitutional right, wasn't it? Or did that not apply to people who actually contributed to society? The jab was subtle, but unmistakable. Several people in the gallery shifted uncomfortably. The judge stayed calm. She absolutely had the right to ask. But according to the officer, she'd told him she didn't carry her license because her lawyer handled traffic matters and his time was being wasted on someone of her stature. Victoria didn't deny it. She said she may have said something to that effect. She was late for a meeting. The officer seemed more interested in flexing his authority than actual public safety. The prosecutor stood and approached with documents. She told the judge that Victoria's driving record showed 6 prior violations in 3 years. All paid, but she'd never appeared in court for any of them. And this particular violation had aggravating circumstances that weren't initially clear. Judge Caprio examined the papers. His expression grew serious. The prior violations included 2 speeding tickets, 3 red lights, and 1 reckless driving citation. That was a significant pattern. Victoria's voice rose. A pattern of what? Living her life? Every single one of those tickets was paid immediately. That's how the system works. You give tickets, I pay them. Everyone's happy. That's the transaction. The judge's voice carried new weight. No, that's not how the system works. Each violation represented a moment when she endangered herself and others. These weren't transactions, they were warnings she'd chosen to ignore. Victoria laughed, actually laughed, a short, bitter sound. Warnings? She'd been driving for 35 years. She was an excellent driver. She'd never caused an accident. These tickets were just revenue generation, and they both knew it. Then the prosecutor mentioned the aggravating circumstances. The traffic camera footage showed Victoria ran the red light in a school zone. The timestamp was 3:15, dismissal time for the elementary school on that block. A pedestrian, later identified as an elderly man, had to jump back onto the curb to avoid being struck by her vehicle. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Judge Caprio raised his hand for silence. He asked if she understood what she'd done. Run a red light in a school zone during dismissal time. Victoria's jaw tightened. She said the school zone was ridiculous, only active for 30 minutes twice a day and caused massive traffic delays. And as for the pedestrian, if he was in the crosswalk when her light was red, that meant he was jaywalking. Why wasn't he getting a ticket? The gasps were louder this time. A mother holding a toddler stared at Victoria with open disbelief. Judge Caprio's expression hardened. He told her the man was in a designated crosswalk. He had the right of way. She ran a red light and nearly struck him. Did she understand the seriousness of what could have happened? Victoria crossed her arms. What could have happened didn't happen. She had complete control of her vehicle. The problem was, people didn't pay attention. They wandered into streets looking at their phones, expecting everyone else to accommodate their carelessness. Why should she be penalised because someone else wasn't careful? The judge leaned forward. She ran the red light. She broke the law. The pedestrian did nothing wrong. Victoria's voice turned sharp. She told him to let her be frank. This whole proceeding was a waste of time. She was busy. She ran a company worth $40 million. She made decisions every day that affected hundreds of employees and their families. She contributed more to the city's economy than most people in that courtroom would earn in their lifetimes. So yes, she ran a red light. Yes, she'd pay the fine. Could they please just process this so she could get back to actual important work? The silence that followed was absolute. Even the court reporter's fingers paused. Victoria had just told an entire courtroom that her work mattered more than their time, their safety, their presence. But she wasn't finished. Victoria looked directly at Judge Caprio, and what she said next crossed a line most people know better than to approach. She said, with all due respect, and she claimed she meant it genuinely, that she didn't need a lecture from someone who'd never built anything. She created opportunities. She developed properties. She generated wealth and employment. What did he do? Sit in a box day after day, stamping papers and collecting a government paycheck. He'd probably never signed the front of a check in his life, only the back. The courtroom exploded. Not with noise, but with the kind of shocked silence that follows a physical blow. The bailiff actually took a step forward before catching himself. In the gallery, a woman gasped so loudly it echoed. A man in a veteran's cap stood up, his face red. Another person whispered, "She didn't just say that." But she had. Victoria Ashford just told a sitting judge that his life's work meant nothing. I don't care how successful you are, there are lines you don't cross. This wasn't confidence, it was contempt, and she was about to learn the difference. Judge Caprio's face transformed. The warmth that defined him vanished. His eyes, usually gentle, became hard. His jaw set. His hands gripped the edge of the bench. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but it filled every corner of the courtroom with absolute authority. He asked if she'd just told the court that his service to the law was meaningless. Victoria didn't back down. She said they operated in different worlds. In her world, results mattered. Productivity mattered. She couldn't afford to spend her morning in a courtroom over something that should take 5 minutes. This wasn't personal, it was just reality. Judge Caprio stood. When he stands during a hearing, people who know him understand something significant is happening. The gallery fell completely silent. Even Victoria seemed to sense the temperature had dropped. The judge told her she'd just demonstrated the most profound disrespect for the court that he'd witnessed in 38 years on the bench. Before Victoria could respond, a voice came from the gallery. A man asked if he could speak. Judge Caprio looked toward the source. An elderly man in his 70s wearing a military veteran's cap stood with careful dignity. The judge nodded and asked him to state his name. Robert Chen, United States Army, Korea. He'd lived in Providence for 52 years and he needed to say something. Judge Caprio gestured for him to continue. Mr. Chen's voice shook slightly, but not with weakness, with controlled fury. He said he'd sat there and listened to this woman insult the judge and he couldn't stay quiet. He had appeared in that courtroom 3 times over the years. Parking violations, nothing serious. Each time, Judge Caprio treated him with respect, listened, was fair, understood he was on a fixed income and worked with him. Mr. Chen turned slightly, looking directly at Victoria. He told her she didn't know what she was talking about. Judge Caprio had probably helped more people in the city than her company ever would. He didn't measure his worth in dollars. He measured it in fairness, in compassion, in making sure people like him didn't get crushed by a system they could barely understand. The fact that she thought money made her better than him showed exactly who she was. What city are you watching from? Drop a comment if you believe endangering children should have serious consequences, because what came next showed that Victoria's recklessness went deeper than one intersection. The courtroom erupted again, but this time Judge Caprio didn't quiet them immediately. He let the wave of disapproval wash over her. He let her hear what the community thought of her words. When he finally raised his hand for silence, his expression had moved beyond anger into something colder. Determination. He told her quietly that she had just made a choice that would define the rest of the hearing. He was now going to review her case with the thoroughness it deserved. The bailiff was instructed to ensure she remained in the courtroom. They were going to examine exactly who Victoria Ashford was and what she truly represented. The judge sat back down and began pulling documents from the file, and Victoria Ashford, for the first time in years, realised her money might not be enough to save her. Judge Caprio opened an expanded file the prosecutor placed before him. He told Victoria they'd discuss the details of the violation more thoroughly. The traffic camera footage had been pulled. The bailiff displayed it on the monitor. The courtroom watched as a silver Mercedes sped through a red light. The timestamp read 3:15. The location was clear. Benefit Street at Hope, directly in front of an elementary school. The video played in real time first. Cars were stopped. Children were visible on the sidewalk, backpacks bobbing. A crossing guard in a bright yellow vest stood at the crosswalk, her stop sign raised. The light was clearly red. Victoria's Mercedes barreled through without slowing. An elderly man, halfway across the crosswalk, jerked backwards so violently he nearly fell. The crossing guard lunged forward, grabbing his arm to steady him, while simultaneously throwing her other arm out to stop 2 children who'd started to step off the curb behind him. Judge Caprio's voice was measured, but hard. He told Victoria the crossing guard was Rebecca Martinez. She'd been serving that post for 12 years. The elderly man she nearly struck was 76-year-old Thomas Wu, a retired postal worker. Those two children she pulled back. One was her 8-year-old daughter. The other was her nephew, who had cerebral palsy and couldn't move quickly. If Mrs. Martinez hadn't reacted in that split second, they might be having a very different conversation, in a very different kind of courtroom. Victoria's face had gone pale, but she tried to maintain composure. She said she couldn't see them clearly. The sun was in her eyes. It was a split-second decision. She thought she could make it through the light. Judge Caprio rewound the footage and played it again, slower this time. The light had been red for 3 full seconds before she entered the intersection. The crossing guard was visible. Her vest was designed to be seen from hundreds of feet away. The children were clearly present, and according to the speed calculation, she was travelling at 52 miles per hour in a posted 25 mile per hour school zone. The prosecutor told the judge that Mrs. Martinez was actually there that day. She'd been waiting to testify. Judge Caprio nodded, and a woman in her 40s rose from the gallery. She was wearing her crossing guard uniform, having come directly from her morning shift. She approached the witness stand with quiet dignity, was sworn in, and sat with her hands folded. Judge Caprio asked her to tell the court what happened that day. Rebecca Martinez took a deep breath. She said she'd been a crossing guard for 12 years. She knew that intersection like her own home. That day, dismissal time, she had her stop sign up. Mr. Wu was crossing like he did every day. He walked his granddaughter home from school 3 days a week. He was in the crosswalk, clearly visible. The light had been red for several seconds. Her voice strengthened. She saw the Mercedes coming, and something told her it wasn't going to stop. She'd learned to read traffic, to sense when a driver wasn't paying attention. But this wasn't someone distracted. This was someone who saw the light and didn't care. Mr. Wu was in the middle of the crosswalk when she realised the car wasn't stopping. She screamed at him to get back. He tried to move, but he had arthritis. He couldn't move fast. The car missed him by inches. She paused, her eyes glistening. Her daughter and nephew were right behind him. Her nephew, Miguel, had cerebral palsy. If she hadn't grabbed them both and pulled them back, if Mr. Wu had been 1 second slower, if any single thing had been different, she would have watched children die in front of her. Her voice broke. That's what this case was about. Not a traffic ticket, not an inconvenience. It was about the fact that someone almost killed people because they were in a hurry. The courtroom was completely silent, except for someone crying quietly in the back row. Judge Caprio waited before speaking. He thanked her. Her testimony was noted. He turned to Victoria, whose face had shifted from pale to flushed, and asked if she had anything to say. Victoria's voice was tight. She said she was sorry the woman was frightened, but nothing actually happened. Everyone was fine. They were talking about what could have happened, not what did happen. You can't charge someone for something that didn't occur. The crossing guard's testimony was emotional, but it didn't change the facts. She ran a red light. That was the violation. Everything else was speculation and drama. Judge Caprio's expression darkened. He told Victoria that Mrs. Martinez's testimony established the severity of her violation, but they should also examine her assertion that she contributed so much to the community. He asked the prosecutor about additional documents. The prosecutor approached with another folder. When Victoria mentioned her company, the prosecutor had pulled public records. What she found was relevant to character and judgment. Judge Caprio opened the folder and his eyebrows rose. He told Victoria her company, Ashford Properties, was currently named in 7 active lawsuits. 3 from former employees alleging wage theft and unsafe working conditions. 4 from tenants claiming uninhabitable living conditions, including lack of heat, water damage and pest infestations. Was this accurate? Victoria's composure cracked completely. She said those lawsuits were frivolous. Disgruntled employees and tenants looking for payouts. Her lawyers were handling them. This had nothing to do with a traffic violation. Judge Caprio closed the folder slowly. He told her she'd stood in that courtroom and said she contributed to society, that she created opportunities, that she mattered more than the laws governing everyone else. These documents told a different story. They told the story of a woman who exploited the people who worked for her and the people who rented from her, who believed wealth insulated her from accountability. He opened another page. The city building inspector had issued 17 violations across her properties in 18 months, including 3 red tag orders for immediate hazards. One apartment building had non-functioning smoke detectors in 12 units. Another had exposed electrical wiring. She wasn't just negligent, she was dangerous. And yet she stood there lecturing him about contribution to society. Victoria's hands trembled as she gripped the podium. Those violations were corrected. They fixed everything. The judge's voice rose for the first time. After how long? After how many families lived in danger? After how many complaints were ignored? She had the resources to maintain those properties safely, but chose profit over people. Just like she chose her schedule over the safety of children in that crosswalk. The prosecutor added that Victoria's license showed 2 prior suspensions resolved through legal channels. One for accumulation of points, another for failure to appear. Both were cleared through her attorney, but the pattern was clear. Victoria snapped. Her attorney handled these things because she didn't have time to sit in courtrooms all day. That's what lawyers were for. Judge Caprio stood again, and this time his voice filled the courtroom with unmistakable authority. He told her attorneys existed to represent, not to exempt from responsibility. She seemed to believe money was a shield against consequences, that her wealth made her immune to the rules governing everyone else, that her time was more valuable than the lives of children, the dignity of her employees, or the safety of her tenants. Today, in that courtroom, she would learn she was wrong. He picked up his gavel, but didn't strike it yet. The original fine for running a red light in a school zone was $500. However, given the aggravating circumstances, her speed of 52 in a 25 zone, the near miss with pedestrians, including children, and her complete lack of remorse, he was increasing the fine to the maximum penalty allowed under law, $2,500. Victoria's eyes widened. $2,500 for a red light? That was outrageous. The judge cut through a protest. He wasn't finished. Her license was suspended for 6 months. During that time, she would complete 80 hours of community service at a children's hospital, where she'd see firsthand what happened to children who weren't as lucky as the ones Mrs. Martinez saved. She would also complete a mandatory 40-hour defensive driving course, not online, but in person, where she'd sit in a classroom with other drivers and learn what she should have learned decades ago. Furthermore, for her contempt of court, for her insult to the judicial system, and for her complete disregard for the dignity of the proceedings, he was holding her in contempt. That was an additional $1,000 fine. Her total was $3,500, plus court costs of $450. Total $3,950. Victoria's voice was shrill, desperate. He couldn't suspend her license. She needed a drive for her business. How was she supposed to get to work? Judge Caprio's response was immediate and cold. The same way millions of people in the city got to work every day. Public transportation, rideshare services. Perhaps she could even walk occasionally and see the neighborhood she claimed to serve. Her business would survive. Her employees would manage, and perhaps, in her absence from the driver's seat, the roads would be a little safer. Victoria tried again, her confidence shattered. She'd appeal. This was excessive, punitive. It wasn't justice. Judge Caprio leaned forward. Justice was exactly what this was. Justice was what happened when someone finally told her no, when someone finally held her accountable for treating people as obstacles instead of human beings. She came into that courtroom believing her wealth made her special. She was leaving it understanding that in the eyes of the law, she was no different from anyone else. He continued, his voice softening slightly, but losing none of its still. She'd asked what he did. He'd tell her. He ensured that for a few hours each day in that room, her bank account meant nothing, her properties meant nothing, her self-proclaimed importance meant nothing. There, she was simply a citizen who endangered lives and showed contempt for the system protecting everyone. There, she was simply someone who had to answer for her choices. That was what he did, and he did it because if he didn't, If they didn't, then people like those children at that crosswalk had no protection from people like her. The gavel fell, the sound echoing through the absolute silence. Victoria stood frozen, her face a mixture of shock, anger, and something that might finally be the beginning of understanding. The bailiff approached. She'd need to surrender her license to the clerk before leaving. She was not to operate a motor vehicle for 6 months, beginning immediately. Violation would result in criminal charges. As Victoria turned to leave, her expensive heels clicking against the floor, Judge Caprio added one final statement. He hoped she used those 6 months wisely. He hoped she spent her time at that hospital looking into the faces of injured children and understanding what she almost caused. He hoped she spent her hours on the bus or train sitting next to the people whose lives she'd never bothered to consider. And he hoped that when she appeared before him again to show proof of her community service and course completion, she came as a different person than the one who walked in that day. Victoria didn't respond. She walked out with whatever dignity she could salvage, which wasn't much. The gallery watched her go, and when the door closed behind her, spontaneous applause erupted. Judge Caprio didn't stop it. He simply nodded to Mrs. Martinez, who wiped tears from her eyes, and to Mr. Chen, who saluted him with a trembling hand. If this reminded you that courtrooms still operate on principles larger than money, go ahead and subscribe to Frederick Explains Court, because we need more spaces where character counts more than capital. This is what happens when entitlement meets accountability. This is what happens when someone finally says no to the wealthy and powerful. Victoria Ashford walked in believing the rules didn't apply to her. She walked out learning they apply to everyone. And maybe, just maybe, that lesson will stick.